So today we at Writers Morning Out are very pleased to welcome Karen Pullen, whose topic will be demystifying the mystery. Everyone loves a good mystery and the sales prove it. Agatha Christie is tied with Shakespeare as the best-selling author of all time, while today's bestseller lists consistently include mystery at the top. The mystery genre is second only to romance. Today's talk will get you started if you'd like to throw your hat into the mystery writing ring. Karen will share what she knows about mystery subgenres, the three characters every mystery must have, ways to create suspense and twist your plot, as well as tips and pitfalls. Karen will offer advice on trends, resources, and conferences. It's a lot to cover in this 1 hour, so she promises to talk fast. Karen is the author of 2 mystery novels, Cold Feet and Cold Heart, both published by Five Star, and a collection of short stories, Restless Dreams, published by Bedazzled Ink. She is the editor of 2 Carolina Crimes short story anthologies, Lust, Love, and Longing, and Rock, Roll, and Ruin. She founded the Triangle chapter of Sisters in Crime, a worldwide organization that supports women and men mystery writers. So without more ado, welcome Karen, and please take it away.
Thank you, Jody. It's good to see faces of people I know, either from Sisters in Crime or from Central Carolina Community College, or just friends. I'm going to share my screen because I have a PowerPoint naturally. If you have questions, maybe save them for the chat, and I'll go over those when we're done. And I also can send a copy of these slides out. So you could, if you want those, just also put that in the chat when you ask for the handout. Yeah, I kind of like this meme, just so I'd throw that in there. So I structured this around 9 decisions. First of all, because I needed some sort of organizing principle. But secondly, so you would know how far along I am. And if you think, is she ever going to stop talking? You know, oh, well, we've got 3 more to go, something like that. And my point of view for this talk is that you all are writers. I know you're all writers, but I didn't know if anyone had written a mystery. So I kind of geared it towards people who have not written a mystery, which is, I know, not true for probably half of you. But maybe you'll get some nugget of information out of it. Anyway, so what is the mystery genre? It has a story that centers around the solving of a baffling crime. And there are genre-specific conventions and reader expectations. There's a crime, which is almost always a murder. There is a sleuth that has to investigate. There are gradually clues that are discovered, and then eventually a villain the identity is discovered, and we also know the motive. So this is a really minimal skeleton for a novel. It's very bare bones, and what's great about it is that you can hang anything on this. So as an author, you have almost total freedom to write a novel when you write a mystery. You have a lot of decisions to make, and that's why we're going to talk about 9 of them. So it's very difficult to get book sales statistics. I believe Nielsen BookScan reports statistics, but you have to pay for that, and they don't include ebooks. But everything I have looked at seems to be pretty consistent in saying that romance is the #1 genre bestseller, and mystery and crime is #2. And some cases, the statistics are they're each about 30% of the genre market. This particular chart shows romance at almost 40 and mystery and crime at 20. Whatever it is, it's a very large part of the genre fiction market. So I thought that would include that. That might be included. The first decision that you have to make when you're writing a mystery is pick a subgenre. Now, you might not deliberately say, oh, I have to pick a subgenre. But when you start writing, depending on how you set up the atmosphere of the book and who the sleuth is, you're going to kind of slot into a subgenre anyway. So I'm just going to talk about what some of those are. There's quite a variety of subgenres in the mystery genre, from cozy to noir, and then many novels do not really fit into one particular categorization, and they can cross subgenres. I want to talk a little bit about the cozy. Readers devour these. A lot of cozy writers have multiple series going on. The cozy is usually sort of more humorous, kind of domestic. It's not very dark. The crime happens off screen, so there's not a lot of gore and violence. And the sleuth is usually a civilian. We don't see police in cozies as main characters. I thought I'd just show these 5 covers from Diane Kelly. She's a member of our Sisters in Crime chapter, a very prolific cozy writer. These each represents a different series that she writes. So we have Death and Taxes series, Paw Enforcement. Then this one is a Mountain Lodge series. You can see there's a think of that with the bear. House Flipper series, and then Southern Homebrew series. And let's see, one thing I want to mention is kind of obvious is often there are puns in the titles of these. Laying down the paw, for example, the proof is in the poison. The type of thing that's represented, for instance, in one of her books from the Southern Homebrew series, when a local bluegrass musician disappears and a jug of her shop's corn liquor is implicated, moonshiner Hattie Hayes must stop further trouble from brewing. So they're kind of fun reads. She's very humorous, and she likes to write humor. But like I said, cozies are fun to read. They're fun to write, and readers love them. Another popular subgenre is the police procedural. Here's 4 authors that write police procedurals. You all, I'm sure, know of others. Michael Connelly is a big one. To write one of these, you have to know how the police operate, because you need to know the tiny details that make it ring true. One way to learn about those is to actually go and observe the operations of a real police department. I know there's some towns around here that occasionally run a sort of citizens police academy, and you can go a couple times, maybe once a week or so, and learn about how they operate and ask questions. So there's also the Writers Police Academy, and a few years ago it was in Raleigh, which was great because we could go and not have to plane tickets and hotel rooms. The Writers Police Academy is now in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It's an amazing event. It's usually 4 days, all day long, with various very knowledgeable people in their field of law enforcement. You get a lot out of it. If you think you want to write police procedurals, something like that would be so helpful. The other end of the spectrum from the cozy is the noir. These are very dark and very gritty. They're often very violent, sometimes hard for some people to read because of the violence is pretty graphic. These are for writers who tend to write noir. I might just pick up this one, Joe Nesbo, especially because he's indicative of a subgenre called Scandinavian noir. A few years ago, the Scandinavians started writing these very dark, pretty horrific stories. I mean, nothing was off limits for them. But people devoured them. This one on the right, Die a Little, it looks like kind of a 1940s cover, doesn't it? But Megan Abbott is a contemporary writer, and this is a contemporary novel. So, what are some other subgenres? Legal, medical, private eyes, very popular. Historical. George was telling me that he had written a historical mystery recently. And then you can mix these genres too. So, it doesn't have to follow a rigid set of rules to be in a subgenre. I don't know if you all want to read any of these quotes. Some of them are kind of funny. Like the mixed, as if it wasn't bad enough that a clone had terminated a robot, Inspector G suspected the killing had been ordered by the Velusian ambassador. You can have a science fiction, police procedural subgenre. So what should you write? Oh, shoot. I hate this one. Oh, here we go. I don't always quite know how these floating bullets work. So I say just write what floats your boat. You're going to have to spend months with it. You should like it. And so think about what you like to read or what you don't like to read and why not. I mean, if you really, really like Agatha Christie, just go ahead and write a traditional mystery novel. That's me. I like the traditional mysteries. But I'm not crazy about the cozy. Sometimes they're a little cute. So mine had a police protagonist, but it was a traditional mystery. Both of them were. Another thing I always recommend is to read some good mysteries. And one way to find them is to look at which books are being nominated for awards. The Edgars are, I would say, the most prestigious because that's a juried award. Those are judged, and publishers can submit to that award. And the list of the nominees, I think if you just go on Wikipedia and say, mystery writers, Edgar Award nominees, you'll find the article with the list of the nominated mysteries. Anthony's and the Agathas are nominated by people who attend those conferences. So you have to attend the BoucherCon conference to nominate a book for the Anthony. And then when you're at BoucherCon, you get the ballot and you vote. So that award and the Agatha Award works the same way. To me, seem more like popularity contests. If I'm at BoucherCon and I get a ballot and I haven't ever heard of any of the books, I'm probably just going to vote for the author who's maybe someone I know or maybe someone I've heard of, right? So to me, the Anthony and Agatha, they're going to be good books and they're going to be, published first novels. But the Edgars, I think, carry a little more weight, in my opinion. So I do recommend reading mysteries if you're going to write one. So the next decision you have to make is what's your story going to be? By story, I mean kind of what is the situation? What's the setting? Who is the victim? It needs to be something that you think that other people would be interested in reading about. When I wrote my first book, Cold Feet, I had been going to a lot of weddings. My nieces and nephews were getting married. My kids were getting married. And I thought, wow, wedding, that would be a fascinating place to have a murder mystery. So that's how I wrote Cold Feet. It's set at a wedding in which the bride never makes it down the aisle. And I also thought, well, that's interesting because nobody wants to murder the bride, surely. But it turns out a lot of people had reasons to not like that bride very much. So you want to find a situation that has some interest for people, that has opportunity for interesting characters and a setting, and there's a potential for conflict, risk, and danger. There are many cliches around mysteries, and in the handout that I emailed to Jody, which you can get later, there's an article by, I forget her name, but there's an article in there and the references there about cliches in mystery. It's kind of a funny article, but I think it's got some validity, so that might be worth looking at. So you don't just write it. Here's an example of a story. Just described in 25 words. I thought that was funny. Sorry. Your third decision is who is in this book? Who are the characters? There's 3 necessary characters, and this is kind of obvious. You need a victim. You need a villain, a killer, a criminal, and you need some sort of sleuth character. So I'll talk about each of those in turn. We also need other suspects. Otherwise, there's no mystery. You just have the 3 characters. It is important to try to avoid stereotypes. I think sometimes when people start writing, their characters are kind of derivative, maybe derived from a lot of TV shows they've seen. So we want to be fresh with our characters. I think it helps to give every character a secret, or give them something they're afraid of or something they don't want to reveal. And even your secondary characters need to be in some way. So you have to work on the characters. Let's talk a little bit about. Obviously, a murder victim doesn't have it coming. No, you can't say they had it coming, but the villain thinks the victim had it coming. So there's a reason in the villain's mind, and it's usually something associated with the victim's secrets. So what could this be? Well, the victim could be blackmailing the villain. The victim might have secrets in her past that the villain uncovers and feels, starts thinking of the victim in a different way. The victim might have money or power or some ability to transform the villain's life if that victim is disposed of. So I would start with the victim. I mean, you can always continue to build on these reasons as you write the book, but there has to be some reason for that particular person to be chosen as the victim. And they might not ever really appear in the book very much, especially if you knock them off in chapter 1. But you need to know their backstory. You need to know why they've been why they've been selected for this particular murder mystery. And then once that why is discovered, it can lead to the villain, and that helps the sleuth once they discover the motive. There are often other things in the victim's past that lead to other suspects too, red herrings. Okay, the villain, I don't know why all my bullets have started floating. So villains justify their killing. I mean, I'm not talking about serial killer books, which I hate. I hate those. There's no motive, and they're just evil people. But the kind of books I'm talking about, the villain doesn't usually has a reason. They could be greedy, jealous, or full of hate, but they justify themselves. For instance, they could right a prior wrong, or they could be getting revenge, or they could be protecting somebody. And I think you should try to humanize your villain. I wrote down here, save the cat. That's a phrase from a book by a man named Blake Snyder on screenwriting, where he talks about humanizing characters fairly early in a movie. Maybe have them save a cat. Once you see somebody save the cat, you know they're basically a good person. But villains can be multidimensional. They can do good things too. So, try to humanize your villain. I thought I'd throw in a little plug for our Sisters in Crime speaker next month on September 9th, Colleen Thompson. She's going to talk about crafting the ideal villain. These talks are Zoom talks. They're open to the public. If you want to get a link, you need to be on our mailing list. So just go to, I think it's our website, triangle sync, SINC.com, and you can sign up for the mailing list and get announcements about talks like this. Anyway, I would say I'm looking forward to that, but I'm going to be out of the country that day. But they do get recorded, just like this one. So here's a quote from Stephen King. Readers must be fair and remember, even bad guys, most of them anyway, see themselves as good. They are the heroes of their own lives. Giving them a fair chance as characters can create some interesting shades of gray, and shades of gray are also a part of life. Trying to think of Stephen King's bad guys. The one that comes to mind is Misery, the Kathy Bates character. In her mind, she was a good person. Remember how she sort of kidnapped the writer. I think she started cutting off body parts or something. Stephen King always writes horror. Okay, I thought I'd mention these suspects. So these were, I'm not going to read all of these, but in my book Cold Feet, I had other people in the book who were there at the wedding, and they had some interest in disrupting the wedding, or didn't like the bride for some reason, or were unhappy about the wedding. And all of these, the groom's ex, the groom's father, there were two groomsmen who were not happy. The groom had a sister, and she wanted to marry her girlfriend, but she couldn't. This was back before the Defense of Marriage Act. The groom's uncle was there, and he had lost a job for stalking the bride. And then the bride had a big secret, and maybe the groom found out about it. So these were people who had, could possibly be suspect. I want to write about the sleuth. Oops. Okay, so You have to decide if you're going to have your sleuth character have a reason, professional reason to investigate the murder. And it could be that they're a policeman, but it could also be they're a judge. Look at Margaret Meeran. Wasn't her one of her famous characters?
A judge.
They could be a pathologist, a probation officer, private investigators are very common. So they have a professional reason to be interested in solving the murder. If not, if you want an amateur sleuth, then they need a reason to want to solve crimes. Because most of us, if we discover a body, say, on our morning walk, we're not going to say, oh, I have to find out who did this. We're just going to turn it over to the police. So there needs to be a reason, and I'm just thinking about Miss Marple, sweet little old Miss Marple. Her only reason was that she knew everybody, and she could figure things out. And also in those mysteries, the police are a little bit bumbling, a little bit baffled. But you want to be careful with that, because in my experience, police are not bumbling and baffled. They're very professional and good at what they do. So just, be careful. A lot of times an amateur sleuth gets involved because they might be themselves a suspect, or their spouse or friend is a suspect. And so they have to go and figure out what really happened in order to protect someone. If you want to see how other people do that, pick up some cozies and see how those writers handle that problem. The sleuth character should also be kind of intrinsically interesting, certainly to you, because you're going to live with this character for a long time. So, you want the person to be intriguing. And you do have the big question is, are they single? Or do they have family baggage? Most sleuths are unattached, just because I believe it's the writer just doesn't want to have to drag family along, but not all. So there's a couple like Ruth Rendell's Inspector Wexworth. He's happily married. He has grown daughters. I think he maybe even has grandchildren. And so he's kind of an exception. But sometimes his family, I think she probably wrote 25, 30 Inspector Wexworth books. Sometimes his family does get involved in the story somehow. It's often something they're working on professionally. And whoever the sleuth is, whatever kind of expertise that person has, you want to find some experts to help you. Obviously, Google is your friend. You can do a lot just researching online. It really helps to find a real person. My sleuth is an agent of the State Bureau of Investigation, the SBI. And when I first started writing about her, I tried to get in touch with the SBI. Their PR person said, "We're too busy, can't talk to you." Then I saw an article in the paper about a woman who was retiring from the SBI after, 20 or 25 years, named Shirley Birch. And I just called her up. She's only Shirley Birch in the Raleigh phone book. So I just called her up. She was delightful and she was happy to help me. She was also an undercover drug agent like my character was, so she was perfect. But generally, if you can find people who aren't too busy, they like to share their expertise. So another researcher I'm thinking of, I know some of you know Sarah Johnson. So she writes books about a forensic odontologist, which
Mhm.
that specialty is teeth. And that's not what Sarah knows. Sarah was a fifth grade teacher. But she has done her research and she's lined up experts that she can talk to that help her. And also does, she visits labs and she watches what they do. It's a very specialized world that she's learned about. So these are some sleuth characters, and it's no accident that most of them are British, because I love the British mysteries, masterpiece mystery. We have Vera, Miss Marple, Endeavor, Morse, Foyle from Foyle's War, Sherlock, and then I had to throw in some Americans, Cagney and Lacey. All of these are single people except Lacey. Lacey is married. She is a mother. But Vera, Miss Marple, Endeavor, and Sherlock are all single. Foyle is a widower. Yeah. So they're kind of independent. They don't have family. I guess Miss Marple has a nephew, right? That she loves and who helps her. So also if they're single, you can have a romance subplot, which we did see with Endeavor. Sherlock often has some sort of female relationship going on. I really can't ever keep. Okay, your fourth decision is setting. I think setting is just as important as characters. It's the world that your story is in. So you have to say, is it historical? Where is it geographically? What's the weather like? What's the culture like? It gives the color and texture to the book. And it's useful to the writer because that way your characters can interact with the setting. They can interact with clothing, food and drink, transportation, just how the world looks. I also have a writing tip, which I'll talk about later, which is I think on every page, the character should somehow interact with the setting. It's a way of grounding your character in the reader's mind. Where is the person? Here's some settings. I thought any of these would be great. A tattoo parlor, a cruise ship, a circus, the Badlands of Dakota, and maybe a rehab facility. I think any of these would work. But I think you can see how different the stories would be in each of these settings. I hope you can see that. Okay, now we got to talk about plot. Decision 5. I love this cartoon by Grant Snyder. It shows kind of some of the problems with some plots. Lengthy prologue is often thought of as a problem. There's a big plot hole here. Of course, it's a problem. The tunnel of badly written love. Unresolved subplot. I don't think that's such a problem, actually. I don't mind that. And then critical reaction where everybody seems to be falling down during twist. That was kind of cute. So I thought I'd mention some writers that I think are just masters at plotting. If you have read any of these books, you'll understand what I mean. Agatha Christie, of course. These two books I mentioned here are have amazing plots because it's unexpected what happens. So you think you know what's happening and you're reading really carefully, but you don't really. Now, Murder on the Orient Express, I guess people have seen that because that's a movie. So, but I'm not going to spoil it by telling you. Oops. Don't know if you all have read the Kate Atkinson mysteries where Jackson Brodie is her sleuth. These are amazingly beautifully written mysteries, and I recommend all of them. The plots are very intricate, but yeah, she's just an amazing writer. Anything Kate Atkinson writes, I just run to the bookstore and get it right away. And then I thought I'd mention these 3 books by Ruth Rendell, another amazing writer. I think she passed away a couple years ago, but she wrote 80, 90 books. I don't know. She seemed to write one every year, more often than that. And these are 3 that have excellent plots. And then Gone Girl, which is more recent. I don't know if you all have read Gone Girl. I recommend it. So let's talk about what has to happen in a mystery plot. So the opening scene's important because you need to kind of pull your reader into the world. It doesn't necessarily have to be the crime. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. It needs to be the world of the story. It could be a scene from the past. Sometimes writers stick a scene in first that actually happens later in the story. I personally hate that. If you can't write a good first scene, what kind of writer are you? And I don't want to know what happens later. I want it to be chronological. I want the suspense to build for me. I don't want to see some sort of, hideous crime scene that doesn't actually occur until page 2. That's just me. So it pulls you into the world. And then the next thing we really need is an inciting incident that pulls the sleuth into solving the crime. And this is usually in the first chapter. Again, it doesn't have to be, but it starts the rising action of the story. And then in the rising action, this is going to be the bulk of the book where we learn the clues. We get some subplots. We get some danger and risk occurring for the sleuth or other characters. And I'm going to mention a few things about the next slide. And then finally, there's a scene where we find out who done it and why, a climactic scene. And then there's often some sort of denouement where loose ends are wrapped up. Sometimes the sleuth is explaining what happened. That typical scene where you have the sleuth and the cast of characters kind of describe what happened. But the denouement is a little more than that. It's often kind of a happier scene. So in Cold Feet, again, like I said, it started with a wedding. And so I ended it with a wedding, which the wedding took place months after the murder was solved. But I needed to kind of close that circle by having another wedding, a happy wedding. So the first one was not happy. So here's some ways to torment your sleuth. Somebody told me, I said, what should I, the middle of the book is hard to write. There's a lot. I've got to write 200 pages. What am I going to put in there? And somebody said, well, just put your character up a tree and throw rocks at her. So torment your sleuth. Okay. You can have a hostile environment. You can have it pouring rain or an ice storm. How about an ice storm? That's good for North Carolina. We love those. It could be that she has some physical discomfort, like a toothache or back spasms. These are helpful for weaving in the story. And actually, some of it might just be an emotional discomfort. Like I mentioned inner demons. We could see addiction, family issues, fears. She could also be lied to. People could be telling lies, and I say she because my sleuth is a she, but obviously could be a he. People lie all the time. All people lie, basically. And then your sleuth is trying to figure out, is there any truth telling here? What are they? Which of these people can I trust? roadblocks, detours, and dead ends. Yeah, have some of those, not a lot, because readers can get kind of frustrated if it all seems to be going nowhere. So you do want some sort of progress to be made in the investigation. Threats to family, friends, and other characters. If there are bad people in your book, and there are bad people because there's a killer in your book, they might be threatening other people. You can actually have another murder occur, another victim of this person. So that's rising action. So I thought I'd mention this. Do I have to plot? Because I know George was telling me he's a pantser. He just sits down and it flows. I say, good for you. I don't know in a mystery if that's a great idea. If it works, it's fine. But mysteries are complicated. You have the story that's being revealed to the reader, and then you have the real story, which is what's actually happening. And it's a lot to keep track of. I think a little bit of plotting is helpful, just to not write yourself into a corner, as I have done in the past. So what I usually do is just write kind of a synopsis. This is what happened. This is who did it. And then I revise that as I go along, and as new characters here, it can always be tweaked. You don't have to, there's I took a master class, James Patterson master class. He writes a very, very detailed synopsis, like a 40-page synopsis. So he's got the book half written before he even starts. That is not the way many people work. But it's good to have some kind of idea of what you're doing before you head off and get lost. Some ideas for plot twists are unreliable narrator, kill a character unexpectedly, arrest the wrong person, turn a suspect into a hero, or the hero into a suspect. Plot twists are always welcome. I think readers like them. They like getting to the end of the chapter and saying, whoa, I didn't see that coming. So we do need clues, though. It needs to be logical that these things happen. Talk a little bit about subplots. Sure. Even when we look at masterpiece mystery and watch, say one of those wonderfully crafted mysteries, you'll see subplots. They're often based on, not always, but there's often some sort of romantic element. There's complications with friends and family. If they are amateur sleuths, sometimes there's problems with the day job. There could be things that happened in the past that aren't resolved and appear unrelated, but then aren't unrelated. Maybe a crime in the past comes back to haunt your sleuth. So these are some ideas for subplots, and they don't have to be solved. In my book, my character's mother disappeared when she was a very young child. When Stella was a young child, her mother disappeared, and it wasn't ever resolved in the first or the second book. Working on the third one, and it's going to be resolved. Because I don't know if I want to write any more books about this character. So I got to solve that one. Okay, you need to make a decision about point of view. You're going to write in the first person, which generally implies a very close kind of narrator. The narrator often is sharing thoughts and feelings, as well as actions and things that the narrator's discovering, or the character's discovering. The limitation is that the whole story has to be told from that person's point of view. So anything that happens when that character isn't there, that character doesn't know about. So that's a limitation. You can have third person point of view, which can either be more distant, or it can be, again, a close third. You can have multiple people, multiple points of view in your book. And a writer that does that really well is Elizabeth George. You know, if you've ever read her books, they're 900-page story tops. One reason they're so long is she has so many characters telling their version of the story. If you do have multiple points of view, obviously you want to not mix them in a scene or even in a chapter. And then you have to decide, is this going to be kind of a close first or third person point of view? Are we going to have a lot of interior monologue, a lot of thoughts and feelings, or is it going to be more removed? And there's place for all of this in the mystery world. Just depends on how you like to write. Currently, unreliable narrators are popular. I'm thinking of Gone Girl. There was one right after that. Was it The Woman on the Train? Something like that. Also, I think she was simply drunk all the time, but she was not reliable. People who forget things a lot are not reliable narrators. That's a decision. We'll talk a little bit about scenes. A scene is, which you all know, you're writers, a dramatic telling of an event that occurs at a single time in a single place. And in a scene, you can have dialogue, inner thoughts, action, emotion, reaction, description, and setting. And I say nearly every scene should have something happen or have some sort of change to move the story forward. And I say nearly every scene because I think there's always a place in a mystery novel for not a lot to happen, where your sleuth is just taking a break, just maybe sitting on a bench, relaxing, thinking about what they know so far. So it's sort of like, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to recap what I know. And that doesn't necessarily move the story forward, but I think it helps the reader to kind of tie things together. I thought I'd just do this little math problem here, a little breakdown of a novel, so you can kind of see how it might be structured. If it's 280 pages and 3 acts, and if each scene is somewhere around 4 or 5 pages, you would need about 66 scenes, and they'd be distributed kind of this way: an opening scene, a shorter act 1 that maybe has 7 chapters, 13 scenes. Act 2 and 3 have the bulk of the scenes, and then a denouement of 2 scenes where you reveal. Anyway, this is from a book called Writing and Selling Your Mystery Novel by Hallie Ephron. And yes, she is Nora Ephron's sister, the mystery writer. The last decision to make is how to end this. So you can end it right at the moment of the final climax, where there might be some dramatic scene. Maybe there's some sort of a battle between good and evil, and that could end it right there. Or it could be ended maybe a scene later where the killer is arrested and carried off. Or you could have a scene where things are back to normal and people pick up the pieces and move on, which is what I did by putting a happy wedding at the end of my book. And it closes this circle. In the handout, there's a little list of endings to avoid. Okay. Now get going. Okay, so I want to say that kind of concludes what I have to say about writing mysteries, but now I have some general things that might just be helpful. I do a whole talk on polishing your writing, staying out of the slush pile. You know, I call it runs with scissors. Getting rid of things that are going to give agents or editors reasons to reject you. So this boils that all down onto one page. I'll just read these through, and you can, prologue. A lot of editors and agents do not like prologues. I mean, I still see them in books, but there has to be a good reason that it's not just your first chapter. Backstory. So you're going to spend a lot of time with your characters. You're going to give them backstory, but you don't need to dump it into the novel. Just think about Lee Child's Jack Reacher. When you pick up a Jack Reacher book, is there any backstory in there? There's maybe in chapter 3 a sentence about how his brother died. That's about it. So we don't really need the backstory as a reader. And flashbacks similarly interrupt forward motion, and I would be real careful with flashbacks. I wouldn't put in pages and pages and pages of flashback. If it's important, put it at the beginning of the book and say, this is where the book starts with this part of the story. Dreams, no, nobody's interested in anyone's dreams. Try to put what happens in chronological sequence. I know there are books that don't do that, where they jump around in time, and that's okay, because that might just be kind of the structure of the book. You might go from 1910 to 1960, but you're deliberately doing that. You're not, and you're doing it for a reason, because they're two parallel stories. They may have some common themes, or they may relate to each other. But in general, when you're writing a mystery, try to keep things going in chronological sequence. And then, like I said, once on the page, have your character interact with the setting. Dialogue. A lot of problems that people have with dialogue is they actually try to make it like a conversation. Or it could, as you know, Bob, an information exchange. But dialogue I don't think should be used unless it's actually expressing some sort of conflict. So you want the characters, you don't want them to really agree with one another. You want them to be at odds in some way when they're speaking. And like I said, slow down once in a while, have your character relax and reflect on things. And then bookend scenes is something I like, is where the end of it does sort of echo the beginning, and the characters can think about where they've been. So what does it take to write a mystery? Keeping your plot spinning, avoiding pitfalls. In my handout, there's a couple pages of some writing pitfalls. Most of you, I think, know, but there might be something useful in there. It takes a draft and many revisions, as all of you know who have written mysteries. We just keep working on them. Rejections are inevitable. Again, as writers, we know that. Passion, patience, and persistence. There's help. And I want to mention Sisters in Crime. Was formed, I think, 1987 to support women crime writers who were not getting the reviews or the advances or the keynote positions at conferences. They were just kind of being ignored. So they said, we're going to band together and we're going to support each other. Men are welcome. We have men members in our chapter. Right now, Sisters in Crime has over 4,500 members, and there's some chapters in Canada and in England. One of the biggest chapters is the Guppies, because it's an online chapter, so it doesn't matter where you live, you can join the Guppies. It stands for Great Unpublished, but many of the members are now published, and they're wonderful mentors to the other members. They have a lot of really good online classes. They also publish anthologies, so it's an opportunity to get published, to submit stories to their anthology. Our local chapter meets, I mentioned already, we're meeting in September. We meet every month on Zoom, and we have programs from, experts in law enforcement, speakers on craft, and speakers on the business of being a writer. And again, if you want to go to that website, trianglesync.com, you can just get on the email list and you'll learn about what we're doing. And a lot of it's open to the public. Mystery Writers of America is more of a professional writing organization. In order to be an active member, you have to have met certain publishing criteria. You can join as an affiliate member if you don't meet those criteria. They produce the Edgar Awards, and if you join MWA, you're automatically a member of the Southeast U.S. chapter, which again is another good resource for writers. They meet, again, have Zoom meetings every month, and it's the whole Southeast, so it includes Florida and Tennessee and Georgia, so there's writers from all over in that chapter. And MWA also has started publishing anthologies. This book, I'm just showing you the cover of this book, which is fairly recent, How to Write a Mystery, a handbook. It has, I don't know how many articles. I just scanned the table of contents. It looked like 30, 40 articles written by well-known mystery writers that look like it would be a great resource. I haven't bought it, but I think I'm gonna. I also want to mention conferences, another way to learn about what's going on in the mystery writing community. There's the fan festivals, Mouse Domestic and VoucherCon. These are set up for readers. So there's a lot of writers that go there, and they'll be on panels and they'll do signings, and you have keynote speakers and featured speakers, and they go multiple days, 3-4 days, but they are set up for readers. But if you're a writer, if you've published a book, you can usually get on a panel, which is a nice way for people to learn about you. If you haven't published a book, it's a nice way to kind of learn about the mystery writing community. Sometimes there are agents and publishers there, but that's not the main purpose of these two conferences. Conferences that are really good for writers and who write mysteries are Thriller Fest and Sleuth Fest. Thriller Fest is in New York City. There are agents there, publishers there. There's talks on crafts. They will, read query letters. There'll be manuscript critiques. So I personally like Sleuth Fest because it doesn't cost an arm and a leg to go. Mm-hmm. Sleuth Fest is expensive to go to New York. But anyway, Sleuth Fest is run by Mystery Writers of America, and it's a good conference to go to if you have a book and you're trying to find a publisher. Another thing you can do if you have a book that's not published is submit to one of these two contests. The winner of each of these gets published by Minotaur Books. The first one is in conjunction with Mouse Domestic, and it's the best first traditional mystery novel. You win $10,000 advance and publication. The other one is the first crime novel, and that's in conjunction with Mystery Writers of America. So do all of you know Ruth Moose? Yes, many of us know Ruth Moose. She won the best first traditional mystery novel competition a few years back. She was a friend of mine. We were in a writing group together. She was helping me with my mystery, and she mentioned that she had a mystery she had written 25 years earlier, and it was on a floppy disk somewhere. She got it turned into, a regular document. It was called Doing It at the Dixie Do. It's it's set at a bed and breakfast in a little town like Pittsburgh. And she won that competition that year. I was really, really proud of her. Very exciting. Even if you don't win, a lot of times the books get passed on to publishers. So my book, I submitted, I think, to the Mouse Domestic one, didn't win, but I did learn later that some publishers had seen it. So that's a plus. These are some tools. Let's see, I've been talking an hour, so I'm gonna wrap this up.
This has been fabulous, Karen. What a great presentation. So much great information, resources, craft information. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone has, about the structure of a romance and how to put one together. So thank you so much.